So while that's about gender inequity, and the work when I bring white into the word men is about racial and gender equity and lots of other things as well. For those of us that stood up earlier, I want to challenge us to learn to better see inclusion as our issue, rather than just an issue for groups that have been historically marginalized, or to see gender more than simply it's a women's issue and have we fixed the women's problem yet? And to look more towards the complexity related to the gender continuum as opposed to a dichotomy. Over the last 15 years of my work, I've only known 2 straight white guys that were in the role in corporate America called Chief Diversity Officer. One was Steve Buccaretti at Coca-Cola in Atlanta, and the other one was Frank McCloskey at Georgia Power, also in Atlanta. They could actually see each other out the high-rise windows in downtown Atlanta. Both of those guys have now retired. And I know there's some other straight white guys that are in those senior leadership roles, but largely for really good reasons, leadership around this topic in the corporate level, and I would also suspect in the not-for-profit and educational level, has largely turned over to those representatives, those courageous representatives of often historically marginalized groups. And it's time that that change. Not to push them out of the way, but actually for us, straight white guys, to rediscover our voice with this. So I want to encourage you in your realm of control, in your world, to figure out what's your equity cause, what's your mission. And I also want to recognize that that's already going on here for many of us in the room, so this is not a new conversation. And I also want to say, this is my little plug, in the last 30 years I now only know about 15 or 20 straight white guys that are doing corporate diversity training in the US, 7 or 8 of them who work with me, with our firm, and it's a little lonely. And I want to encourage more of us from our group to get involved in this work alongside of some really courageous white women, men and women of color, and out gay and lesbian, bisexual, transgendered folks. So we need you. I need you. And I grew up as a guy who thought that my competence was tied to what I was supposed to know or what I was supposed to do. And about 10 years ago, I coined a term for this phenomenon that I and many other men have seemed to unconsciously practice. And I call it acquired male answer syndrome. And how it goes is, if I'm asked a definitive question, I've learned to give a definitive answer, whether the heck I know what I'm talking about or not. And I don't even know that I'm even doing it. It's so unconscious. So acquired male answer syndrome. It's part of, for me, the conditioning about growing up male in the United States. So there's a US component to that, about don't show any chinks in the armor, don't let them see you sweat, and pretend like you know it. And I just want to cop to the fact that that hasn't really worked really well for me. I don't know about anybody else. And one of the things I can say now is I feel for the first time in my adult life in the last couple of years, I actually know what I'm doing. And that in itself is really scary, because I know that when I think I know what I'm doing, I go to the second dynamic that I've noticed in my life, which is what I call, I don't need no stinking help phenomenon. And so when I think I know what I'm doing, and I have that acquired male answer syndrome that's sort of in my genetic DNA coding, or more likely my conditioning, and I don't need no help, that's a really bad combo. And so I'm here to say, I need lots of help, and I do know some of what I'm doing, and they're not mutually exclusive. And so let's get engaged in some conversations. White male to white male, white male to white female, white male to men and women of color, men and women of color to men and women of color. Those conversations are really important, and I understand that you heard some about that last night. So, sort of begin to close here, and I was sort of preparing for this, I was saying, what are some of the keys for what I would call in our practice full diversity partnerships? And these are not just limited to white men, although some of the examples I might give, because I'm a white guy, are going to be related to that. And so the first one is, I said, your and my perspective of the world is not wrong. It's just incomplete. And I find lots of times, because of an either-or world that I've grown up in, that I've grown very, very skilled at basically listening to you just long enough to see if I agree with you. And when I don't, I'm into advocacy. And I mask that advocacy as my passion to the mission about why I'm here and what I'm here to do on this short, journey around the sun, as many orbits as I get. So my perspective isn't wrong, but it's not complete. So I need other conversations. I need other dialogue. I need to be challenged in ways that it may at first or second glance have me appear to be like, I can't believe you're misconstruing that. Where could you ever get that? And what happens is I stop listening to you, right? Because I'm defending my good guyness, my innocence. So that's one thing. Other pieces, again, as I said earlier, I believe I and you and we as a culture and a society and a globe have to learn to get more comfortable, particularly being uncomfortable and confused, less sure, and more curious about what I don't know. That's been for me one of the great gifts of having the privilege of being able to travel the globe, and particularly going into the developing world. I've learned more about myself in those places than I ever thought. And I also, when I say the developing world, I'm also talking about parts of the United States. Thirdly, for white men in particular, recognize this paradox. You don't have to give up your individuality to claim membership in the white, straight male club if you're heterosexual. It's not a choice. I get to be an individual Bill, and when I have the privilege of basically saying, don't stereotype me and stick me in that group because I don't like what you're generalizing, that's my work. And it's not about, let's not have that conversation, it's about how is it that those two words have created a set of associations, many of which are not positive, and can we talk more about what's behind why those words were stated? Because I really want to know, and it's not about fixing or changing you, it's really about how does that stuff impact our relationship, our partnership currently, and what's the potential for the future. This one I love. This is a colleague in our organization, Cherie Buckner-Webb, that I learned this from. Cherie is the first elected African-American woman in the Idaho State Legislature. I met Cherie when she was in a D&I position at Hewlett-Packard in Boise 20 or so years ago. And Cherie now works for us part of the time, as well as doing really good legislative work in the state of Idaho. Cherie said to me once, she's African-American, she said, Bill, I'm not asking you to give up your skin color privilege or your male privilege or heterosexual privilege, which you can't do, and by the way, you didn't ask for it. I want you to notice it. And then I want you to learn to use it honorably. And the using it honorably piece is a really fascinating mental reframe for me, because honorably is a really sort of nebulous word, and like, what does that mean? And honorably can also, for some, feel patronizing and tokenizing, and that's not the case. So, but for me, about what does it mean to honorably, first of all, notice the privilege that I have because of that group membership, and then to use it, as opposed to check it, which is a common phrase that I'm hearing on college campuses, check your privilege. I don't buy that. I think that you run from however it is that you have that privilege and claiming it and noticing it and looking at the context and the nuance and how that impacts how you are being heard and how you are hearing others is critical. It's critical. And it's not about feeling bad. At times, I really feel terrible about what's happening almost daily. There's a cacophony of things happening on this globe, in this country. There was another one last night at another college campus. It's not about feeling guilty or shameful. It is about noticing that and working your way through that so that you can stand in your personal power and not shrink back, as opposed to saying, I don't know, I got this stuff, but I'm going to step out of the way. So another story, I was on the board at AEE in the 80s. I was the board chair at the time. And we were really struggling in Sanford. This is sort of when you and I sort of got together. We were struggling with the whole issue of diversity. And of course, it was an all-white board. There were no people of color anywhere to be seen. And I said, okay, I'm going to resign my position, and I want to basically sort of step aside so that some person of color could take over this role. And I'll never forget this. I had Tom Herbert, who is a teacher. I haven't talked to Tom in years. I don't even know what's going on. Teacher at Concord High, who came up to me. He said, Bill, the association elected you into this role. I don't want you to abdicate that position. I want you to stand there and figure out what you're going to do about it rather than just get the hell out of the way. That was really, really powerful, courageous, powerful. And sometimes I get in the way. But I want to be in the way as a part of the conversation rather than to say, please, tell me, Sanford, what should I do now? Peggy, what should I do now? Kristen, what should I do now? Robin. Equity, inclusion, guys, is our work as well. And I know you know this, but I want to challenge you to know this more than up here, sort of like I sort of knew this. What does it take to know it down here? Really, our work. And for me, what's my self-interest and your self-interest in seeing a more just and equitable society, organization, company, school, wherever you're at, community, rather than I'm here to help, quote unquote, those people with their issues. I'm on point, I'm reporting for duty, give me the plan. This is my issue. I got to understand how it affects me, Bill, personally, what I do about that. So self-interest is a huge one for me. And because without self-interest, it goes to apathy really quickly, because these issues can feel on some days like you're boiling the ocean. It's just like, why bother? It's just too hard. Self-interest keeps me focused.